No one could imagine that a normal afternoon could turn into an inescapable nightmare. I also never thought that one phone call from the doctor could plunge my world into the abyss within seconds. The fluorescent lights on the hospital ceiling flickered, reflecting off my trembling hands. Only one question echoed in my mind. Why now, of all times, did he choose to disappear? He, the man who once promised to walk with me through life's hardships, where was he now, as my mother lay on the operating table, hovering between life and death? My heart hammered as if ready to burst when I glanced at the phone screen. No messages, no missed calls, just the long, indifferent, beeping tone like an icy slap across my face. I'm Lucy Harrington, 42 years old, living in Charleston, South Carolina, and this was the moment I was forced to admit that my 17-year marriage had nothing left to hold on to. Dr. Harrison, I choked out, chasing after him through the stark white hospital hallway. My mother, how is she? His voice was cold but quick, as if time itself raced against survival. Her condition is critical. We need emergency surgery within the next 30 minutes. She has internal bleeding, and if we don't intervene immediately, she won't make it. I nodded repeatedly, mechanically, my hand reaching for the phone for the 5th time in less than 10 minutes. I needed my husband, not because I couldn't handle it myself, but because I had always believed he would be there when I needed him most. I called Ethan again. After 3 rings, his voice answered, cold, irritated, distant. What now, Lucy? I'm in a meeting. Can you stop calling me when I'm busy? I gripped the phone tightly, fighting to keep my voice from breaking. My mother is dying. They have to operate immediately. I can't be here alone. A moment of silence. Then Ethan delivered a response like a knife. I can't leave a meeting just for this. You're a grown woman. Deal with it. And he hung up. I stood frozen in the hospital hallway where the scent of antiseptic hit my nostrils like a dagger to the chest. My eyes burned, yet not a single tear fell, not because I was strong, but because my tears had run dry long ago. From every absence Ethan excused, from cold dinners when he came home late without notice, from the looks he gave me as if I were a debt he couldn't wait to pay off. When the nurses wheeled my mother into surgery, I barely had a second to grasp her hand. Her eyes were closed tight, skin pale, lips pressed together as if fighting something even stronger than death itself. She was a woman who never surrendered, and now she was still fighting, while her son-in-law vanished like a cowardly shadow. I sank onto the hard chair in the waiting room, feeling empty like a dry well. But soon after, an anger ignited within me, quiet and dangerous, smoldering beneath layers of cooled ashes. I looked at my phone again. No new messages, no calls. Only one undeniable truth. Ethan wasn't here, and perhaps he never truly had been. I had thought that last call was the peak of my pain. Turns out I was far too naive. Only minutes after my mother had been wheeled into surgery, as I curled up beside the hospital coffee vending machine, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. I opened it, secretly hoping he'd returned, perhaps to offer some apology or at least inquire about my mother. But no. I've sold the house at Ravenhill. All the paperwork is done. Tonight, I'm flying to Sao Paulo with someone who makes me happy. Don't call. Don't bother me. Goodbye. I read and reread the message, unable to believe my eyes. Ravenhill? The old house where I'd grown up with my parents, where every wall and staircase held the memories of 4 generations. And Ethan had sold it? Without discussion, without warning, my entire body went cold. A chilling sensation traveled from my neck down to my spine. Not because of betrayal, but because I'd allowed him to linger in the shadows too long, quietly dismantling my life, piece by piece. I gasped, struggling to stay calm, but in my mind a storm of questions erupted. How did he sell it? That house was under my name. My father had made it clear. Anyone who wants to touch this ancestral land will have to step over my daughter's dead body. My father died 6 years ago, certainly not expecting the person stepping over him would be the very son-in-law he once trusted. I clenched the phone, my hands shook, but my eyes remained wide, open, and dry. Sao Paulo. He chose Brazil to escape? With whom? The answer came faster than I'd imagined as soon as I opened Instagram searching for some remnants of Ethan. His profile had been deleted. But I didn't need to look far. It was Megan Flynn, 28 years old, Ethan's new assistant, who'd giggled at last year's Christmas party when I slipped on the icy steps. Now it was clear. They'd planned their exit from my life as if I were merely an expired contract. I lifted my head toward the hospital ceiling, where the lights still flickered tiredly, mirroring my mental state. No, I wouldn't just sit here while he destroyed what remained. I dug through my bag, pulling out something Ethan had no idea I kept with me. My father's notebook. Inside was a photocopy of the house deed, in my name, transferred exclusively by my father just before his death. Alongside a handwritten note, scribbled but resolute. Lucy, if one day you suspect someone is trying to take this house away, don't hesitate to check the appendix in the bank. I've always believed you're the only one who knows how to protect what truly matters. I never thought I'd have to use it, but now I knew. The game had just begun. When I started to reply to Ethan, I stopped. Answering him? No. That was far too gentle for a traitor like him. I opened my banking app. Empty. The joint account had been drained. My personal account had only $612 left. It was so absurd I almost laughed out loud right in the hospital. He hadn't just taken the money and the house. He was determined to sever every last root I'd clung to for survival. But Ethan forgot one thing. I wasn't someone who broke easily. And I had something he didn't. Memories, evidence, and the relentless grudge of a woman who'd just lost everything. I put my phone away and stood up. My eyes weren't wet like earlier. They were dangerously bright. If Ethan thought he could walk away peacefully, he was mistaken. Fly away, Ethan, I whispered to myself. Fly away with that girl. Then watch, I'll make sure you land straight in hell. I had never been the type to cling to memories, but that night, as I sat alone in my car in front of the hospital gates, yellow light from the security cabin illuminating the foggy windshield, I allowed myself to drift back to Ravenhill, the place I'd always thought would be my last refuge if life fell apart. The mansion had been built in 1893 by my great-grandfather, Jonathan Harrington, a merchant who exported timber and linen. 4 generations of Harringtons had lived, loved, had children, and left this world within those thick red brick walls. It wasn't just a house. It was my family's lifeblood, where every secret, sorrow, joy, and victory was guarded like a priceless treasure. My father, William Harrington, once said, "A family isn't flesh and blood, but those who protect the past so the future doesn't become hollow." He was a quiet, stern, but fair man. Every Sunday morning, he'd take me through each room, telling me stories linked to the house. The oil painting in the living room my great-grandmother painted when she was just 14, the grandfather clock that had ticked steadily since my grandfather's days, the marble wash basin imported from Italy as a wedding gift from my great-grandfather to his wife. Ethan had once seemed touched when hearing those stories. I remember the first time I brought him to Ravenhill when we just started dating. He stood silently on the porch, staring up at the ivy-covered balconies, and said, "I feel like I've stepped into a classic novel. You're so lucky to have this place." He had shown respect for my father, calling him Mr. Harrington with reverence. He'd even woken up early once to help my father replant the lavender garden out back. I believed Ethan understood Ravenhill's value wasn't in its architecture or land, but in those intangible things: love, legacy, and family pride. But then my father died 3 years ago from a stroke while reading the newspaper in his study. I was shattered while Ethan was disturbingly silent. He didn't cry. He didn't say much beyond shallow words. After the funeral, he never again stepped foot into the study, the place my father had once sat, the room that held property maps, antique ledgers, and his thick diary. Instead, Ethan began meddling with things that didn't belong to him. He suggested renovating the house in a modern style, selling off old-fashioned furniture, hiring experts to appraise the property's potential, all disguised as efficient asset management. I'd suspected it, but had convinced myself he was only trying to help, until the day I noticed the grandfather clock was gone. Then the antique porcelain dinnerware. Next was the painting my great-grandmother had created, replaced by a lifeless print. When I asked, he said they'd gone out for restoration but never returned. I'd once loved Ethan as if he were an extension of my family, but after my father's death, he'd become a stranger behind a familiar face. His love was no longer sincere admiration, but a calculating gaze, as if Ravenhill were something to bargain for, to buy and sell. Once, when I caught him looking at property listings and sketches for a modern villa complex, I asked, "What are you doing?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just looking at how profitable this land could be if properly exploited. I remained silent. That was the first time I felt Ravenhill was slowly suffocating. Not from time, but from someone I'd once considered family. I gripped the steering wheel tightly as the memories flooded back. On the passenger seat, my father's notebook lay there like the final anchor holding me from collapse. Ethan had sold the house. But did he realize he was stepping into territory not everyone was qualified to touch? Because Ravenhill was never meant for sale, it was built precisely to resist people like him. Ethan thought I was a fool, a naive wife living in illusions, easily fooled by sweet, hollow words. But the only thing he misjudged was me. I first became suspicious more than 4 months ago, on a Friday evening when Ethan said he had to make an urgent business trip to Atlanta. He forgot to delete the hotel booking notification from his phone. I saw the name flash up, Megan Flynn, Ethan's professional assistant. She'd booked a double room with a lake view for Mr. and Mrs. Crawford. Crawford wasn't her surname, but clearly she was playing the role convincingly. I didn't cause a scene, didn't scream, didn't confront him on the spot. I knew that if I acted purely on emotion, I'd lose everything. I needed evidence, and I needed dangerous silence. That night, I called Olivia Brooks, an old friend from college, now a private investigator in Columbia. She recommended I work with her best associate, Maxine Coleman, who is known in the industry as a financial ghost. 3 weeks later, Maxine sent me the first dossier. I still remember the nausea I felt opening each photo. Ethan and Megan holding hands at an upscale seafood restaurant in Hilton Head, staring into each other's eyes as if I'd never existed. Photos of them shopping for jewelry at Cartier, and one of Megan wearing a diamond necklace exactly like the one missing from my grandmother's jewelry box. I had no more doubts, but the worst was yet to come. Maxine then sent bank statements, documents that truly stunned me. Ethan had secretly drained our joint account, transferring small sums to buffer accounts registered under shell companies in Florida, then wiring the funds overseas, to banks in Panama and Sao Paulo. Worse yet, he'd also tampered with my personal account, withdrawing $3,500 monthly under the guise of asset maintenance fees. But the sharpest blow came when Maxine handed me a copy of the illegal deed transferring Ravenhill. Ethan had forged my signature, fabricated a notarization stamp, and sent the documents to a real estate broker in Dallas, claiming the owner was absent due to medical reasons. I remembered laughing bitterly at that moment, not just because of his audacity, but because I'd once believed he genuinely cared for Ravenhill. That night, I sat alone in the library of my mother's house, where I was temporarily staying to care for her. I switched on the desk lamp and pulled out the old wooden box containing insurance papers. As I reviewed my mother's accounts, I discovered the final piece that froze my blood. My mother's health insurance had been canceled 2 weeks earlier. I immediately called the insurance company. They confirmed the cancellation request had come from Ethan's email account, citing cost reduction as the patient no longer had a chance of recovery. He wasn't just taking our assets, he planned to drown me in medical debt, leaving me incapable of pursuing him. My hands shook as I called Maxine. He canceled my mother's insurance. He wants me buried in hospital bills, unable to fight back. Maxine exhaled sharply, her voice cold as steel. Lucy, this goes far beyond financial fraud. This is organized conspiracy. I think it's time we bring the FBI in. I paused for a few seconds, then responded in an eerily calm voice. No, not yet. I don't want anyone rushing in and ruining this. He thinks I'm weak. Let him take a few more steps into the trap he's digging himself. Maxine hesitated. Are you sure? He could keep draining funds. He might disappear. You're worried he'll disappear? I laughed. I'm the one who secretly put a GPS tracker in his suitcase 2 weeks ago. It updates me every 3 hours. I know every hotel he stays at, every credit card transaction he makes. If he stops somewhere longer than 15 minutes, I know. And the phone was silent for 3 seconds. Then Maxine said, I've never seen someone betrayed yet as dangerously prepared as you. I looked out the window, moonlight spilling onto the distant woods where Ravenhill hid in darkness. Ethan had started a game he believed he controlled, but I held the ultimate advantage. I was the only one who knew exactly where he would fall. That night, in the hospital waiting room, I opened the dark brown leather notebook my father gave me before he died. On the third page was a notarized copy of a document Ethan had never known existed, never even suspected. Irrevocable trust, Ravenhill Trust, established by my grandmother, Eleanor Harrington, on June 4, 1981. My grandmother had been an exceptionally intelligent, sharp, and, when necessary, ruthless woman. She once told me when I was only 16, a house can be burned, robbed, or sold, but if you know how to protect it legally, even the devil himself cannot touch it. Ethan might forge documents, he might fool naive buyers, but he couldn't break an irrevocable trust, especially when my grandmother had appointed a legal trustee, Mr. Clarence Murphy, a reclusive lawyer in Asheville who'd never trusted technology or people. Immediately after discovering Ethan had finalized the house sale, I called Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, it's Lucy Harrington. The Ravenhill Trust has been compromised. He didn't ask why or who. He asked only one question. Do you still have the original trust agreement? Yes, in the library safe, and another copy in my father's leather notebook. Then rest assured, I'll call the FBI and prepare legal documents. We'll shut down that transaction like sealing a coffin. The next morning, I called the buyer, Mr. Dennis Raleigh, a middle-aged businessman specializing in luxury real estate investments. His voice sounded cheerful when he heard my name. Ah, Miss Harrington, your husband told me you'd reach out to finalize the transfer. Honestly, $3,400,000 for a property like Ravenhill is the deal of my lifetime. I swallowed the boiling anger in my chest, keeping my voice frighteningly calm. Mr. Raleigh, I regret to disappoint you, but I'm afraid you've purchased something my husband had no right to sell. Silence. Then he laughed nervously. I'm not sure I understand. I emphasized each word carefully. Ravenhill is held within an irrevocable trust, managed by an independent third-party trustee. Any transaction lacking approval from the trustee constitutes legal fraud. If you've already transferred funds, I advise you to immediately call your bank and halt the transaction. This time, there was no laughter. Well, but I have the contract, the signature. My signature? I cut in. Or the one my husband forged. Right then, Maxine, my private investigator, stepped into the hospital room and placed a folder in front of me, containing the trust documents, scanned property deeds, and my official signature on record from the notarized file in 2006. I emailed everything to Mr. Raleigh along with a single line. If you care about your reputation in this industry, I suggest you cooperate with the FBI immediately. 1 minute later, Mr. Raleigh called back, his voice trembling. I'll stop all proceedings. I didn't know. I was tricked. I don't want anything to do with this scam. Good. Then you'd better be ready to give your statement to federal agents. Right at that moment, my phone buzzed again, a message from Ethan. Paperwork's done. You should be grateful I got such a good price. Megan and I are heading to the airport. Goodbye, Lucy. I've chosen my new life. I stared at the screen, then let out a cold laugh. He thought he'd won. I didn't reply. I just sent one final message to Mr. Murphy. Pull the trigger, bring down the curtain. I left the hospital just before 6 p.m. The skies over Charleston were overcast, the wind howling in sharp bursts like a storm was brewing. But the only storm about to strike was the one waiting for Ethan at the international airport. I stepped into my car, shut the door tight, and hit dial. On the other end was federal agent Sarah Martinez, who had been tracking Ethan's case since Maxine submitted the first report 2 weeks ago. Mrs. Harrington, Her voice was low, sharp as a scalpel. "We're in position. He just checked in at gate D13. Looks like he has no idea he's being followed." I closed my eyes for a second, took a deep breath, and opened them again. The fire in me was fully lit. He thinks he's clever, thinks he can slip away like the wind, but this time, he's going to learn something. I'm Willen Harrington's daughter, not some dress-wearing doll waiting to be forgiven. "Copy that," Sarah replied. "He's with a blonde woman, looks about 28. His former assistant?" "Megan Flynn." I spat each word like a stone from my throat. "That girl's wearing my grandmother's necklace. I want it retrieved intact." At the same time, Maxine sent me a link to the airport's security camera feed. The footage came through clearly on my phone screen. Ethan, in the gray suit I had bought him for his birthday last year, pulling a sleek black suitcase. Megan walked beside him, holding a coffee cup, giggling like the world was beneath her feet. "Look at them," Maxine muttered in my earpiece, "acting their hearts out till the very end, like some cheap TV drama power couple." "Wait," I said, eyes locked on the screen. "That suitcase, it's mine. I still have the GPS code. He thinks he's smart, but every step he takes is already in the palm of my hand." Agent Martinez spoke, short and sharp. "Target approaching passport control. My team is in place, moving in 30 seconds. My heart pounded, but I wasn't shaking. Instead, there was a chilling calm, a force I never knew I had. On the screen, two plainclothes agents quietly moved in from behind. At the same time, from a side gate on the other side, Mr. Clarence Murphy, the trustee of the Ravenhill Trust, emerged with two airport security officers. He held up a thick folder, signaling with his hand. When Ethan spotted Clarence, his face froze. "No, no way!" I could read his lips. Megan panicked, looking around wildly, but it was too late. "Mr. Ethan Crawford," one of the agents announced, flashing an FBI badge. "You are under arrest for fraud, forgery of property documents, and illegal overseas fund transfers." Before Ethan could react, Megan burst into tears, backing away. She reached for her phone, but Clarence signaled, and a security officer swiftly took the device from her hand. On the screen, I saw Ethan shouting, "You don't understand. Lucy gave me permission. She signed. I have the papers." Clarence stepped forward, his voice ringing loud and clear through the microphone. "That house is governed by an irrevocable trust. Even if your wife wanted to sell it, she had no authority, and the documents you submitted are entirely forged." Ethan stood frozen. Then, in one final moment of panic, he shoved Megan hard into one of the agents and bolted. He didn't get far. 4 steps, 5 steps. Then a security officer tackled him, pinning him to the floor, his hands locked tightly behind his back. Megan screamed, but no one cared anymore. I watched the scene unfold, my hand gripping the phone, my lips whispering, "Fly, Ethan. Fly straight into prison." Less than an hour after Ethan's arrest at the airport, I received a call from Agent Sarah Martinez. She asked me to come directly to the Charleston FBI office to review materials just recovered from the laptop inside his suitcase. I stepped into the conference room where harsh white lights illuminated the large screen at the front. Maxine was already there, holding a folder as thick as a phone book from the 1980s. She dropped it in front of me, her voice taut. "Basil, he didn't just betray you, Lucy. He's a professional predator, and you weren't his only prey." Sarah approached, turning on the projector. The first image to appear was a map of the U.S. with 12 red dots scattered across states from Virginia to Colorado. Each of these dots, Sarah pointed, represents a case with nearly identical patterns over the past 3 years. In every instance, wealthy families with elderly or critically ill members. Maxine continued, her voice like stretched wire. He gained access by posing as a lawyer, broker, or family member, then forged documents, illegally transferred property, and drained accounts while the victim was either hospitalized or incapacitated. It felt like a punch to the gut. In that moment, I realized Ethan was never my husband. He was a systematic predator. Sarah clicked to the next slide. The screen displayed multiple images of Megan Flynn, the woman I once believed was just a flirty secretary. signing bank documents under various aliases. One photo showed her speaking with a shell company rep in Belize. Another showed her seated across from an elderly man, IV still in his arm, signing a paper later confirmed by the FBI as a property transfer authorization. I froze. She's an accomplice. Sarah nodded. Not just a mistress, she's a key link in a property theft and money laundering network. Megan established at least 6 shell companies posing as medical or insurance providers. She also coordinated Ethan's business trips, where the real deals happened. Maxine opened the folder and pulled out a photo that twisted my stomach. Ethan smiling next to an elderly man in a wheelchair, his hand gently resting on the man's shoulder. Megan stood behind, dressed as a private care nurse. This victim passed away 2 weeks after signing, Maxine said, eyes locked on mine. His family lost a farm worth nearly $2,800,000. Ethan sold it 2 weeks later to a resort developer. I clenched my fists under the table. The horror wasn't in what he did, it was in how he did it, with that warm smile on his face. How many more? I asked, my voice hoarse. Sarah flipped to the next page. We've confirmed 12 cases so far, but based on the files on his hard drive, the actual number may be up to 30. Several of the transfers are still in process. Maxine added, You're the first one with enough clarity, evidence, and grit to bring us in on time. If you hadn't acted fast, your mother might have been one of the next victims. I turned away, trying to hold back tears, not from pain, but from rage. Rage at myself for ever sharing a bed with a predator. Sarah handed me an envelope. This is the preliminary indictment. Ethan Crawford and Megan Flynn will be held on charges of organized fraud, falsification of legal documents, property theft by sophisticated means, international money laundering, and conspiracy to commit federal crimes. I took it, feeling like I was holding the iron chain that would bind the two of them for good. They're not getting out of this easily, Sarah said firmly. I looked her straight in the eye, and for the first time since all of this began, my lips curled into a smile. No, because this time, I'm the one tightening the noose. I had just stepped out of the FBI office when Maxine's phone started vibrating nonstop. She glanced at the screen, frowned, then turned to me with a look of alert. Ravenhill's security system just triggered an alert. Unusual movement detected at the west window, second floor, the old library. I felt the blood in my veins freeze. Megan. Only she would be reckless, or stupid, enough to come back while the FBI had an active arrest warrant. I pulled out my car keys, my voice cold as steel. Get in, she's playing her final hand. We reached Ravenhill in 18 minutes, speeding through pitch-black country roads. The iron gates were still closed, no sign of force, but as soon as Maxine opened the surveillance app, the footage came up crystal clear. Megan was inside the library, fumbling with the old safe I knew better than anyone. It held the legal copies of every piece of incriminating evidence, including Ethan's recorded calls with victims. She was dressed in tight black clothing, hair tied back, face masked, but I still recognized my grandmother's necklace glittering beneath her collar. That was the final straw. Is the fail-safe system still active? Maxine asked, already flipping open her laptop. I nodded. My grandmother set it up in 1997. Anyone without a verified fingerprint who tries to access the safe and... Before I could finish, the library camera flashed. Then the footage showed the safe door cracking open, immediately followed by the automatic lock engaging and a thin, colorless mist spraying down from the ceiling. UV dye, Maxine said, sticks to skin for at least 3 weeks. No amount of scrubbing gets it off. On the screen, Megan panicked. She ran to the door, yanking the handle, pounding on the glass. Useless. The door was electronically sealed. Only the owner's access code could unlock it. She turned back to the safe and started burning papers with a travel lighter, but the flames only caught a few sheets before the emergency sprinkler system kicked in, drenching her completely. She doesn't know. That room has separate heat and humidity sensors, I said coldly. My grandmother designed that room as a trap for anyone who dared to touch what wasn't theirs. Maxine hit the alert button to notify the FBI. The arrest team's en route. Want to say anything to her? I picked up the mic connected to the house's internal speaker system, pressed the button, and spoke in a calm voice. Hello, Megan. Pretty quick, but unfortunately not quite smart enough. You didn't know. That room locks from the outside the moment someone unverified opens the safe. And now you've been marked, recorded, and isolated. Megan screamed in frustration, covering her face as if she could hide from the truth beaming down on her. 1 hour later, Agent Martinez arrived at Ravenhill with her team. When they entered the library, Megan was still huddled by the bookshelf, ankle deep in water, hair a mess, hands stained with ink and soaked paper, but most notably, her skin glowed under the UV light. Purple splotches lit up clearly across her wrists, neck, and face. That's it, Sarah muttered, slipping on gloves. You're under arrest for unlawful entry, destruction of property, and attempted tampering with federal evidence. But I'm sure you already know that. Megan didn't answer. She bowed her head, lips trembling, her eyes dry. No more tears left for someone who'd hit rock bottom. I stood outside the room, watching through the bulletproof glass. The documents she tried to burn had already been collected and dried by Maxine, with digital backups stored hours earlier. Nothing disappeared at Ravenhill unless I allowed it. Sarah turned to me. You know, Lucy, a lot of people have money or power, but very few are prepared the way you were. Honestly, I don't think Ethan ever suspected that the woman he most underestimated would be the one who built a legal and physical trap around every inch of his life. I didn't smile, I just looked toward the safe, where my grandmother once kept everything she considered priceless. She always said, if the enemy wants to burn down the house, let them lock themselves in the room full of gasoline. 2 weeks after the arrest at Ravenhill, I sat in courtroom number 4 at the Charleston Federal Courthouse, dressed in a simple black dress, my eyes dry and unwavering. In front of me sat the two people who had tried to rip my life apart like an old book, Ethan Crawford and Megan Flynn, now clad in orange prison jumpsuits, handcuffed and flanked by 2 federal marshals. The courtroom was sealed, every sound muffled by the weight of tension. The federal prosecutor stood, holding a file as thick as a Bible, and read clearly. The defendants, Ethan Crawford and Megan Flynn, are charged with 37 criminal counts, including federal fraud, forgery of property documents, grand theft, conspiracy to commit a crime, international money laundering, unlawful entry, destruction of evidence, and exploitation of medically vulnerable elderly individuals. Each charge was like a knife, stripping away Ethan's mask of decency. I no longer saw the man I once loved, only a smug criminal unraveling inch by inch under the cold fluorescent lights of justice. When it came time to discuss bail, his lawyer tried to argue financial hardship and remorse, but the judge took exactly 1 minute to declare. Bail is set at $5 million per defendant. If unmet, both will remain in custody until the formal trial date. Not a single dollar was paid. Bank accounts had been frozen and stolen assets were being recovered. Ethan tried to turn toward me, his eyes pleading for one final shred of forgiveness. But I stared ahead, my face showing nothing but finality. Megan, curled up on the defendant's bench, still bore faint traces of the UV dye. She avoided everyone's gaze, head bowed like a trapped animal. No more charm, no more laughter, only the naked truth. And justice. Over a month later, while the investigation continued to expand, I joined Agent Martinez and Maxine at a meeting with the other victims at FBI headquarters. In a long conference room, 12 families from different states sat together for the first time, piecing together the horror that had touched each of their lives. An older man gripped my hand tightly, his voice trembling. If it weren't for you, I might have lost the farm my grandfather built. Not everyone has the courage to fight like you, Lucy. I smiled, a sad, quiet smile, because I knew I wasn't stronger than them. I had simply reached a point where I had nothing left to lose, so I fought with everything I had. That morning, I returned to Ravenhill, where my mother had just been cleared for discharge after nearly a month of steady recovery. As her wheelchair rolled over the familiar stone steps, she looked up, tears in her eyes. "It's still here, my home," she whispered. I knelt beside her, took her hand. "And it always will be, because Grandma didn't let anyone take it, and I didn't let anyone destroy it." We walked together through the oak-floored hallway, lavender from the backyard garden drifting in through the windows. My mother quietly took in each photo on the wall, my father, my grandparents, and even one of me on my wedding day, the last photo before everything changed. I brought her to her old bedroom, now cleaned and freshly scented. The hand-embroidered quilt was neatly folded, the pillows were replaced, and on the nightstand, I had placed a family photo album, the one Ethan once tried to throw out like garbage. My mother opened the first page, her hands trembling, lips moving softly. You kept everything, everything Grandma, your father, and I tried so hard to preserve. I nodded, squeezing her hand gently. Not just kept it, I'll protect it until the end. Outside, morning sunlight filtered through the old oak trees, and Ravenhill stood tall, proud, untouched, and untouchable. I stood at the window, looking out onto the backyard, the place where I rode my first bike at 5, where my father taught me to plant flowers, the place a trader once dreamed of flattening to build a resort. He forgot one thing: legacy isn't land or bricks. Legacy is memory, blood, and the people who refuse to let the past be stolen. And I, Lucy Harrington, am one of them. My story is a bitter reminder that sometimes the one who destroys you is the person you trusted most. But in that moment of betrayal, I learned the greatest lesson. Never underestimate the power of memory, the law, and sheer determination. Blind love can dull your senses, but clarity can save an entire legacy. I didn't just take back my home, I reclaimed ownership of my life. And this time, I'm not letting anyone take it from me again. What do you think about my story and everything Lucy went through? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel to keep discovering powerful real-life stories and deep lessons about family, trust, and standing up for yourself.